Welcome, everyone. You are in session ENT311-R. I think it's technically R1. And it's Enterprise DevOps Patterns of Efficiency. My name's Mike Eshu, and I'm on the AWS Managed Services team, or AMS. I lead our customer onboarding and adoption practice.
I'm Ajit Jhargaonkar. I lead the global DevOps practices and professional services, part of AWS. I travel across the globe, meeting with customers like you. In my discussions, mostly I'm meeting the leaders and executives of the different organizations, and I'm trying to understand and help them how do they increase their efficiency. And I'll be sharing anecdotes from what I learned when talking to them.
Sure. So let me take you through the agenda today. So here we are. We're going to talk about a concept called Enterprise DevOps. Who's doing DevOps today at their business, in their company? Just raise your hand. Right, so you came to an AWS conference, right? Your company's starting to understand transforming and adopting DevOps practices or helping with all of the things we know DevOps does. So experienced audience understand DevOps. How many folks are like ITIL certified of some kind, like some ITIL foundations, experts in the room? Yeah, a few less, right? And so some of the concepts we're going to talk about today relate to how the values of ITIL versus the values of DevOps relate and maybe put forward some new ideas around how we can drive the principles and values of DevOps across your enterprise. And so with that, we'll first define our term, what is enterprise DevOps? And then we'll talk about enterprise DevOps patterns of efficiency, patterns we're seeing customers adopt to drive the expansion of DevOps throughout their company. And then lastly, we'll have two customer case studies. One of our guests may not have been able to make it, but we'll review a case study from the National Australia Bank from a fellow called Steve, and we'll review a case study from Fidelity from a fellow called Jason. And so we'll have them up on the stage as we go along. Let's start with the great debate.
Is there a debate?
What's that?
How many of you think you are in a mature DevOps implementation side? You are in a right session.
That's right. Yesterday was different last time. We had people.
So the good thing is, you got it right. There is no destination of maturity of DevOps. It's a continuous journey. So you definitely have got it right. Thank you for being honest. Now, when we go around and talk to enterprises, most of them want to have DevOps, and they want to have it for different reasons. But I don't come across people who say, I don't want DevOps. So that's, again, a good sign. Now, different teams, they want to do DevOps for different reasons. Many of customers are in different stages of their journey. Some are thinking about it. How many of you are thinking about doing DevOps you are not doing today? Quite a few. Yeah, great. So there are people like you who are thinking about it. There are the ones who have started it, and there are the ones who are on the mature side of it. All of them, the implementation is different, and their goals are different, but they all need some or the other help. Because it's a continuous journey and there is enough scope for optimizing it. There are ways to do DevOps better. There are proven paths that has helped us gain efficiency. And we plan to share the 5 patterns of efficiency that we have seen customers implementing it, benefiting it, and from our own experience at AWS implementing DevOps, that these strategies have helped us. So let's look into what's happening around DevOps. So there is this debate of DevOps in some or the other fashion, that is DevOps really for enterprises? Is it only for startups? Is it going to replace ITIL? Or do I have to pick and choose between ITIL or DevOps? There are lots of these thoughts coming in. We don't necessarily indulge into them because DevOps is a way of mindset. DevOps is not a process, it's not a tool, it's not a technology, it's a mindset of how you operate, how you bring entire organization together to gain efficiency. Not only engineering, but organizational efficiency. And everyone wants speed. All of us here, we all want speed. We all want agility. We all want to focus a lot more on innovation, not just the supporting. So how do we do innovation? How do we bring in agility at scale? How do we shrink our go-to-market time? And still doing all of that for lower cost and higher quality. You don't want to do DevOps and reduce or increase more risk on your security posture. No, that's not the intent. So we'll discuss those. Now, again, most of you said you are implementing DevOps in different stages. Last year, Forrester did the survey, and only 13%, about 13% of those, they have fully implemented it. So we want to understand why. Are there bottlenecks? And I'm sure you are facing those as well, but we'll list it for you. And Mike, you talk to a lot of customers and at AMS. You see those struggles. Can you talk to us about what are those bottlenecks that you think are preventing us?
Yeah, I think, I just see so many challenges. And typically when I'm engaging with a customer, and if you sort of think about my journey, typically approaching central IT teams who may be a little bit concerned about their migration to the cloud, a little bit concerned of their journey, whereas you're perhaps dealing with teams that are already starting to embrace those principles. And so when I meet with customers, I see challenges like these, and hopefully these resonate with everyone. I'm going to break them up a little bit, though. So legacy applications and existing processes. First of all, can you DevOps legacy applications that don't have development teams anymore? COTS applications, commercial off-the-shelf products, right? I think the answer is yes. I think the principles of DevOps, of the idea of like you configure it, you run it, and so we can bring these DevOps principles that we're going to talk about in some of the patterns to legacy applications and existing processes. And so, a quick story dealing with an AMS customer. It's one of kind of my favorite of last reInvent. We were trying to move 50 applications in 50 days, and we're going to talk about why we do that and how we do that in a bit with our National Australia Bank example. With another customer here, and we came to find out that their legacy applications were dependent on Active Directory, which is even sometimes a common pattern in modern applications. And they had existing processes that dictated how their Active Directory domain controllers were hosted. I think it was written in 2004. We looked at the date on the policy. And it stated that all of the domain controllers would be run on bare metal racks in that customer's data center. Now, of course, that policy was written before the cloud was a thing. You couldn't buy it yet. There wasn't AWS Managed Active Directory, which was a service that you could consume. And so, and the way AMS is architected is dependent on that technology. And so we say, all right, we're probably going to need to change that process, that policy, to make way for our legacy applications coming over to cloud. We're going to have to challenge some of our security, risk, and compliance controls that just haven't been modernized themselves. So it's process modernization, which starts to unlock legacy applications migrating to cloud, operating in more modern fashions. And then we've got governance. Oh, did you?
No, I was just going to ask, seems like the focus that we are trying to do is DevOps is not just for the technologists. It's not just the CI/CD pipeline, but there's a lot more to it. There is governance, there is security, and once you start exploring and expanding the whole idea to the entire enterprises, there are a lot more functions that can operate in that manner and help you gain the next level of efficiency. Like in this example, it doesn't have to be only AWS customer, it doesn't have to be only AWS technology. DevOps is a mindset again, and you can apply it to any environment that you're in any stage, whether you're dealing with legacy application or you're creating a cloud-native application, doesn't matter. I think what we're trying to highlight here and educate all of you here is there are set patterns on looking at DevOps, especially when you're dealing with enterprises, because you have a lot more different departments, functions that work collaboratively, and it's just not a small technology, 100-people team, or maybe you have a much bigger organization.
Which lead us to compliance, governance, and security. And so one of the things I'd ask you guys is, how many times, and a lot of DevOps practitioners in the room, how many times have you said, I'm going to say, quote unquote, have reached across the aisle and said to a compliance team, hey, could I automate that control that you just automated me for and make a compliance dashboard and you could ticket me? And the example I'd use of that, I was working with a customer in the United Kingdom, in a regulated industry, and I just happened to be sitting as we went through the course of the day talking about a very ambitious cloud adoption program, and I happened to be sitting next to a woman called Carol, and she was from the compliance department, and she'd worked at the company for many years. Carol wasn't her real name, of course. But she'd worked at the company for, I assume, 25 years, and she really cared about the company. She was not there to stand in the way of innovation, but she was very concerned with that cloud program was going to increase their compliance risk. They thought there was going to be some type of mistake, something would have been implemented incorrectly, and she was not going to be able to do her job, which is assure compliance against her regulators so that the company could operate legally and effectively. And luckily, I was sitting next to her, so I heard her trepidation and her concerns throughout the day. And during one of the breaks, we were just chatting to the person next to you. I said, what if you could we could automate these things you check for? Like, how many of these are pretty binary items where we could go in and kind of build out that compliance dashboard? I know that's not a new idea to this group, but that was sort of me, kind of a DevOps, modernist, cloud guy, reaching across the aisle saying, could we do an experiment and see if your dev teams would prefer to maybe get a ticket once a week or see something on a dashboard that they're regular checking through their course of operations versus getting a list of 75 items at the end of the audit on an annual basis, of which they never have time to go and address because 75 is just too many long. And you could see her face, her whole temperament changed. And she's like, wow, this would change it. I could do better. And the dev teams would like it, and I would like it, and we could minimize the audit to just the subjective portion. And I'm kind of into this cloud thing, right? And I kind of see how I could partner with DevOps teams because we, the sort of the consulting team in the engagement, was able to reach across the aisle. So, when was the last time you reached out, to that staunch security team that was like, no, we need a human in the way, and challenged them to say, hey, could we experiment with doing something that a computer can check all the time versus a security review before a production go live that isn't repeated for 3 years until there's a major upgrade of the system?
That's true.
So what we're going to talk about is some myths that we believe exist in the enterprise about DevOps, right? So these are typically myths perceived by those, central IT teams, and certainly no offense intended if you're on one of those teams, but I think we know that the technologists that perhaps aren't, evolving their knowledge or moving forward or coming along in the cloud journey, perhaps they're trying to block the company's cloud journey, perhaps they're trying to block some of the initiatives you guys are driving at your companies. So one of the myths is it's just stripped down to ITIL. And so I'll admit, my name's Mike, and I like ITIL. And the reason why is because I think ITIL gives us a set of processes from incident management to change management that can be leveraged for really effective professional DevOps. And so these central IT folks say, well, you're not going to do change management. Once you do the DevOps, there's not going to be incidents anymore. You're not going to be, responding to outages. You're just going to take your vacation. And I think those practicing DevOps, taking the page on the weekend, might disagree. But it didn't get into the company's incident management system, so it didn't come up in the operational readiness review. And so the defenders of the way things are, the traditional ways of working, think you're not operating well as a DevOps team. And then a myth along that line is DevOps dilutes governance. So the DevOps teams are just going to go up. They don't care about the company financials. They're not going to take the time to put controls in place. And some of these propagate because teams are going fast and they haven't reached across the aisle to get that insight from the finance team to assist them with financial best practices and taught the finance team, hey, you're going to expect a spike in billing while we're doing a project or doing a migration or deploying a new application. And we do intend to go back and optimize that, but we're going to prioritize availability over cost for a 2-month period and go have that conversation with finance.
I'll give you a bonus one. When I talk around, many a times, some honest conversations come up. I'll give you 2 of my favorite ones. We want to do DevOps, but my operations team is not seeing eye to eye because they think operations is going to go away. And there is no truth to it. Operations is not going away. We all are here because we have a business to run. We all operate. Operations may gain efficiency. It may have more automation. You may reduce the mundane work. That way, all people in operations can focus on things that matter, things that differentiates you. So that's another myth. Another honest conversation came up that cracks me up all the time is why do we want to do DevOps? And there are many reasons. You can ask, because I want to not have manual deployments. One honest person came and said, I don't know what DevOps is, but I want that title because DevOps people get paid more. I appreciated that.
Wow, pretty good.
And the second one is, so I want to make sure that you understand, there is nothing in the name. You can have a DevOps team, you can have a department, but if you're not following the principles, if you're not improving the efficiency, it's not in the name. It reminds me, this was close to 2 decades ago in my first job as an intern, working on a website. And that time it was a dial-up and all. We used to do caching of our pages. We had a supervisor that was completely non-technical, but wanted to understand what we do. As you would guess, instead of writing C-A-C-H-I-N-G, English wasn't my primary first language, I wrote C-A-S-H-I-N-G. And my supervisor was super happy. These guys are doing something that's going to raise some cash. That never happened. So is with DevOps. Unless you do the right thing, you're not going to hit the efficiency. But let's come back to it. I want to talk about the myth. When we talk about DevOps, CI/CD always comes in the discussions, which is great. But DevOps is not just CI/CD. There is a lot more things that needs to happen to make your CI/CD successful. CI/CD is just orchestration. But what goes along with it is a discipline on making it happen in a more mature manner. Otherwise, if you have a wrong pattern, if you don't have checks and balances in place, if you don't have guardrails in place, you might be doing 100 deployments a day and failing 99 of them. So so think about much larger when you're thinking about DevOps, even more than just CI/CD. And the next one, it's similar to DevOps is for startups, or DevOps is only for cloud. There is no truth to it. DevOps is, again, a mindset of how you optimize engineering to gain agility, to allow yourself to do more innovation for lower cost, higher quality, and reaching out to your customers faster, better, more frequently. So it's for enterprises as well. It's not only for startups, it's for all of us. It's the way how we do things. So some of you may not have understanding of what enterprise DevOps is. We'll talk a little bit about how we look at enterprise DevOps. And Mike, you want to explain us how you think enterprise DevOps is?
And I'm going to start with putting you on the spot. So here you have the fellow who runs the professional services DevOps practice. What is your definition of DevOps? I got him.
I'm not in the business of defining. The way I look at it is the DevOps is a change how you do things on an entire organization to get to the next level of efficiency. Now, again, I want to repeat that these are the 5 things that I am always looking for: agility, innovation, faster go-to-market time for lower cost and higher quality. Now, to do that, you may have to do engineering better. You may have to collaborate with other organization components better. You may have to do your budgeting better. You may have to forecast do better. So there are a lot of things that goes in. It's not just CI/CD. It's not just how I do DevSecOps, or it's not just how I promote the code. It's much more beyond than just a pure technology part of it, especially in the enterprise space. If you're a small company, 25 people, yes, all you deal with is you don't have to deal with this other aspects. And that's what makes enterprise DevOps a little bit different than a startup DevOps.
Yep, fair enough. I agree. And so for me, right, I really simplify when customers say I want to do DevOps. I say then you're going to run what you build. Or I sometimes say run what you configure, because I deal a lot with third-party applications. But I think what you just said is critical. Is it's about business value driver and partnering with the business to understand business value. And certainly minimal disruption. Like nobody's choosing to do DevOps because they want outages. Right? We want to build super robust software, leveraging automation so that when we do detect occurrences that need to be reviewed by a human, we can do that. Or if they can be systematically remediated, we can do that. And then we embrace continuous improvement. Like DevOps is all about getting better, iteration, cycling. For the ITIL folks in the room, ITIL, there's 5 books, right? Service strategy, and there's a book on service continuous improvement. So like, 1/5 of the books are about continuous improvement. So what we see is that these values are shared. And we could bring them together, and we can learn from ITIL. We can learn from process robustness around incident management and change management and patch management and service strategy and service design, those ITIL concepts. And we can start to introduce these DevOps concepts, that values, the frame of mind to iterate faster. And we can join them together, and we create enterprise DevOps, right? So those values with still learning the process. Like, I would submit to you the incident management suggestion in ITIL, and it's not required. They just say, hey, this is a way of doing it. Could be leveraged by a DevOps team to learn how to do incident management.
Yeah, I think the intent for whether it's ITIL or DevOps, I think intent is pretty much around the same, or at least the values are same.
Value creation.
We want to move fast. We want to track the changes. We want to get to the root causes faster. We want to do incident management. Procurement, budgeting, whatever, all the ITIL. I have not read any of those books, like you mentioned, but the intent is same in most of these. So instead of getting into the battle of, do I want to pick and choose ITIL versus DevOps, I don't think there is versus. If you don't do a built-in mechanism into your DevOps processes, then you are at the mercy of bolted-on process. You'll have to have ITIL auditors and implementing those. So I think it's the transition. If you're starting a place where you don't have any DevOps process, you cannot just disband ITIL processes today. Your organization is going to fall apart. There are things that are needed for right purpose, but as you mature them, you're automating them, and you're still within that framework in a certain way. So I don't think necessarily it's a battle which one you pick. It's a part of the journey. As you gain more efficiency, you get to the next level, and you can start building things in, architecting things in, versus relying on bolting things on.
And exactly. And so what we show on this slide in these bullets is what it takes when you take two of those and blend them together. So I had, for a time, ran a product management function at Amazon. And it was fun working with our development teams, and I kind of had this ITIL background, and I like to go back to the doctrine on occasion. And I would tell the team, you know, what's amazing is Amazon's a world-class ITIL shop, but we don't say that. And many people at Amazon would disagree with that. But if you review the processes suggested in those books, Amazon's doing world-class incident management. We have a single ticketing system across our enterprise. We're doing world-class change management. You know, everything's driven by a thoughtful change with a smart rollback plan. And teams say, well, we don't have a change advisory board. We don't need that. Oh, but don't you get your changes reviewed by a bar raiser? Oh, yeah, we do that, but you know that's not a change advisory board. Wait, why isn't it? It's just a semantic debate we're having now, aren't we? We want to make changes that don't have downtime and don't impact the business. So enterprise DevOps, we suggest embrace existing and best practice processes that are coming out soon. Like, I still think those processes that you find in the ITIL books are valuable to be studied if you're struggling with change management or incident management. And that's part of those values of DevOps that are driving you to consider that study and evolve your practice. You can DevOps legacy apps, right? We can still have teams that are configuring and operating their configured third-party applications, or an application that was built long ago in a language perhaps the operator doesn't understand, but they're able to make configuration changes. They're able to embrace those principles. They're willing to take the page because they have ownership over those applications. To me, this is the most important one. Build a culture of inclusion. Reach across the aisle. And if you can't reach across the aisle, perhaps you're an individual contributor developer, or you're an individual contributor security person, and you've tried to reach across the aisle to the DevOps team, or you as the DevOps team have reached across the aisle to the security team and you're not getting something back, escalate. That needs management attention, and you need to drive through that red tape so that the organization can move forward and compete together. And lastly, in-source value creation. So again, I'm on the AMS team. We can do undifferentiated heavy lifting of patch management and tried and true capabilities around how you operate infrastructure, but put that value creation up to a higher level where you're able to deliver value through business applications to the business. When you can find a third-party product that does paging for you, you don't need to build a paging system and integrate with a telco to send a SMS or a page out. And so I use these Foursquare models, we call them, and you can see some examples of them. I'm going to start from the left to describe the tool. And if I can give you one thing today to take home, is using a simple operating model diagram, these Foursquare models, to articulate who's doing what. So to explain it, vertically I divide design or perhaps engineering from operations, and horizontally I divide apps, the app layer, from infrastructure. And of course we can debate where these lines are driven. Is this the patched operating system? Is it patching of JBoss? If I'm doing serverless, how do I quite draw those lines? Is AWS doing the lower half? That's not really the debate we want to have with this diagram. We want to answer the question of who's going to do what, and we can assign ownership for process and interaction between the different teams and tooling that's going to be built by these teams to do their work. On the far right-hand side, you've got purist DevOps, that 25-person startup. One team is doing all of the things. What we're talking about today is in the middle, so this concept of enterprise DevOps, where teams with specialties in the enterprise are owning that bottom layer. Think about your networking experts. Think about folks that are concerned about cloud. They have the Juniper certifications across the top of their resume. They're concerned that cloud networking may disrupt their job function. It won't. We need networking excellence in enterprise, doing complex networking implementations to deliver business value to application teams, and that's in that bottom layer. Governance checks, automated or manual. We think about security and compliance checks. Think back to Carol. She could operate in that bottom layer. She can drive those checks into the environments that the DevOps teams are consuming. So I suggest you go back and draw this diagram out for you today. Somebody doing your DDoS for you, and then the application teams are just reliant on that service. Maybe you're actually doing enterprise DevOps today, and we can expand that model, and we can articulate to those teams who we want to partner with where they're going to add value and how the business is going to be built on top of the critical operational function that they provide.
I really like the middle bucket that you showed up there. Can we go back to that,
Sure.
please? How many of you know this? Have you heard of a COE concept? Anyone? What do you mean by it? What does COE stands for? Center of Excellence? Excellent.
I've heard that. I've heard Center of Excellence.
Excellent, except I think there should be correction of errors.
And that's what it's called at Amazon.
Exactly. So what happens is as you gain maturity into your performing functions here that you see in the middle bucket, you don't necessarily have to have people who are doing exact central IT as a function. But as things are getting automated, these are subject matter expertise. They can help build those guardrails. They can help you track where are those anti-patterns that does not help. They can help you build patterns that succeeds, but also can help you watch for what to watch for. So don't think as a doer function necessarily. It is an enablement function as you gain maturity into operations, as you gain maturity into DevOps implementation. And as you explore it out, I actually challenge even that 25 people company that we talked about, you still have that center of excellence. You have subject matter expertise that fuel it. And for enterprises, that is the way you scale it out. You don't have your best people necessarily just beat the code and beat the keyboard. They have to think, how do we scale it out? Are there things that we can do? And we'll talk about some of those in patterns of efficiency as well.
I'm going to call that a pattern of efficiency. That's a bonus pattern of efficiency as well.
Okay.
Which is, do a correction of errors, right? We all know to do an RCA analysis. So I'm going to tell you that's number 0.
Okay.
Pattern of efficiency.
Cool. So let's, I'll accept that. So let's look at what happens if you don't follow these patterns. And we have seen repeated patterns when DevOps has gone wrong. Number one, that happened to me, and I was the reason it happened. DevOps became pseudo-ops, and I'll talk in next slide about the patterns of efficiency. This was the biggest mess that I did, but let's come to it. You have a DevOps team, and I go around and see that, I have a new DevOps team, and it sits between developers and operations. What do? They help operations and they help developers as well. They are not building things in. They are not establishing patterns that gets automated. So watch out for those. You may have center of excellence this time for sure, but make sure that they are not the doers. They are the enablers. But if they don't, then they end up becoming the knowledge center. They end up becoming the bottleneck. And they are the only people who know how cloud works. They are the only people who knows how canary deployment is going to work, how CI/CD is going to work, and DevSecOps is going to work. And it does not benefit anyone in long term, neither organization scale. The second is another flavor of it. The DevOps team becomes the SRE team. Development team does not do resilience testing. We have a SRE team that does it. That's a pretty common pattern we see. So don't be victimized by those. Again, the goal is everyone should be able to do large-scale contribution and not punt your responsibility, your accountability to another middle bucket, whether call it DevOps, SRE, or whatever you want to call it. We want to implement DevOps, so we are building a brand new team of DevOps without really knowing what is the end game. What do you want to go there? Why do you want to do it? Or are you doing it for getting more money, like the guy who was honest? So watch out for what your intent is. Why do you want to do it? I've also seen DevOps slowed us down or slows us down. So we don't want to do it. Or we started doing, but it was slowing us down. Nothing was flowing through the pipeline. We didn't have skill set, so we stopped it. Remember, it's a journey. There will be bumps. There will be potholes. You will fall into them. But it's all about learning. And learning doesn't mean that, I learned, but learning doesn't fructify unless you correct that behavior and go further. And the last one, Mike also touched on it. When we are doing it, does everyone, are we going to have everyone have access so they can do whatever they want? Or it's going to dilute our security risk and compliance posture? No, we are not talking about it. We are talking lower risk, higher quality from the beginning. And how do you do that is also you have to watch out. If you don't, you will fall into one of those or maybe more. So let's get into our main learnings for today. There are 5 patterns that I want to talk about. Number 1 is enablement and repeatability. And that also goes back to the middle tier. You have DevOps implementation going, but is it same thing that you're doing every day? Is it repeatable? How do you make it scalable? If you're not thinking in those terms, how would you make it scale for the rest of the organization? So Amazon started implementing DevOps in 2001, and towards the end of 2009, they thought they were at a good stage. I was not at Amazon back then. But it's a journey, it takes time. But what made it successful was first teams started to have smaller teams, everyone started to do most of the things. You all know the basics of DevOps. I saw many people raise hands, so we'll not repeat that. But what made it successful was each team started to think about, are there ways that I don't have to do this thing again? They started to have responsibility of managing their environments. So they created little tools. And that's why it took long. But you don't have to have that long journey. An example is your service catalog that Amazon released last year. If you have a way where you can create your work, make it repeatable, others can take it from the catalog, make it better, make another version of it, or use it. So repeatability is an important part that enables the enablement. And there are many other tools as well. So it's not just service catalog. You can look at AWS config rules. And there are many, many such things where not only you can create templates, but you can make it repeatable for the rest of the organization. Even better, you can actually make it on GitHub or wherever you want, so community can benefit as well. And we are beginning to see a trend that a lot more community contributions are coming up. No one wants to reinvent the wheel, nor should you. Go check out what's available there, refine it, make it more context fitting to your context, and use it. So that's number 1 pattern, where enablement and repeatability, that's very, very important part. Without those, you will not have efficiency. You will have DevOps team that does same thing. They will go, every time you have a new project, you go to your so-called DevOps team and say, hey, give me a repository. Can you create a CI/CD pipeline for me? Can you hook it up with SonarQube or something? Can you do this, that? But instead, what you can do is you can create templates, and you can make it available. So if you have a new Java project starting, go to the service catalog, vendor catalog, template, and that's how you kick off your project. No one needs to go to anyone else. Now, when you're doing the implementation of these repeatability patterns, you also got to be watchful that you're putting guardrails in place. An example is anyone can create a S3 bucket, but you have an implementation that no one can make it public. Right? So there are many such guardrails you can put in place. In other words, enablement happens when you encourage the right behavior, but also protect the wrong behavior to go out. That's part of it. The number 2 is speed. Now, speed does not come without guardrails. We were just talking about it. If you are just after the speed, know that you can fall off the cliff and die, that you will never be able to drive again. So guardrails are super critical. And that's why when you think about repeatability and enablement, you cannot gain momentum and speed without having guardrails in place. And I can give a couple examples of guardrails, how we like to think about guardrails. First, they are templates. Second, they are the only way to standardize things across the organization. Remember, scaling happens with standardization. That way, it's the third thing that happens with extension to standardization is you are establishing patterns. You're encouraging everyone to follow the right pattern. But at the same time, when people don't follow that, it bubbles up right away. And you can find what are those anti-patterns that you can go and correct people, processes, behavior, whatever is needed. But it's important to understand that speed is not it's not a unit direction. You have to have it balanced by the guardrails. Gain the speed once you have the guardrails in place. Gain the speed when you have checks and balances in place. Otherwise, for the sake of saying you will be doing 50,000 deployments, but they all might come back. And just to give a flavor of how things happen at Amazon, in 2014, Amazon did over 50 million deployments a year. We stopped counting after that. It doesn't make sense because we do so many. So it's not the number of deployments, but how many of them are actually going out and driving efficiency? How many of those deployments do come back and requires you do retweaking, reworking on them? They all are support. Reworking is support. And that does not help us focus on innovation. So again, from the get-go, start the right templates, put in the right guardrails in place, and then gain the speed. The third one is inclusiveness. And this is the biggest point in my dictionary, and it's also the biggest mistake I made. That's why probably it's on the top. Before coming to AWS, I was leading all-in cloud migration for Edmunds.com. I was managing all of the operations. My team was very successful in doing that. We wrapped up the whole migration, did the whole DevOps thing with less than 10 people. We knocked it out, whole thing months ahead of time for way less money and everything, all good. We were the big heroes. My team, I'm so proud of them that did it. But we failed to include all the rest of the organization together. So what happened is, all the time that we gained, we went back and we started to teach others, how does this function work, how does things get deployed, and so on. I failed to include many other departments as well. I distinctly remember working closely with finance department, but not having a good understanding with them is how does this whole thing work? They have to produce data for auditing, and it was much easier earlier. We have a list of devices and assets that are there for 3 to 5 years, and asset tracking is just super simple. I was also managing ITIL team, and then team had a problem. Whenever they ask for asset keys, we don't have the real view of it. And you go and pull the number, you might have 3,000 EC2 instances, and 2 days after, when it's downscaling, you may have only 700. So data does not match, and then how are you going to face auditors and all that? But if you include them from the beginning, which I can go back and fix it, but if you had done that from beginning, everyone in the company will have understanding how we procure new infrastructure, how do we do OpEx on them.
And how did that end? In the end, how did that finish?
Well, we ended up working very closely, learning a few things. Actually, it ended up on a better note because on the engineering side, we had a lot more better understanding on how company did the finance function, how did we do budgeting.
As it turns out, that matters to finance.
It does.
CapEx matters. And it matters to you, too, when the paycheck cashes.
And they do. The other thing it's important to know is it's not a one-way direction. As a technologist, we think that we are driving it, and DevOps is a technology thing. In return, by working closely with our finance function, I ended up learning and taking their help in doing analysis on how to get more out of it. At that time, this is 2014 to 16 timeframe, they came up with the idea that, Ajit, you will gain a lot more efficiency if you structure your RIs differently and you structure a lot more differently on the spot instances. So there is a lot of benefit that comes by including them. I was asking our teams to change their skill set, and I failed to tell our HR team. And I wish that they had been in loop, we could have arranged some training for the rest of the organization. So there are a lot of anecdotes that you see that if you don't do inclusiveness, then sooner or later you have to do it. But if you do it sooner, you're better off. You're off to a good ground to begin with. It gives you wings in your implementation. Even if they don't understand, just have brown bags. Just have whatever, keep message going so everyone can figure out how their functions are going to change. The number 4 is focus on differentiating factors. So a lot of times when you start taking off your DevOps journey, you may not have skill set in the teams, but can you really focus on, or should you focus on everything that you don't know and let go of what you know? Probably not. There is still a reason why you're part of the organization, because you bring in something unique on the table. Do focus on those. At the same time, allow yourself to learn other things. Don't dilute your value proposition. Do not dilute your subject matter expertise, but start focusing on differentiating factors. Also, at times, you may need help from others. Go get that help. It may be from AMS team, it may be from professional services team, it may be from other department, or maybe your neighborhood. Whoever can help you, you should not shy away from asking for help. But when you ask for help, do not ask for doers, ask for enablers. So when you get trained so you can do it. Everyone can do it. It's not about outsourcing, it's about learning, so everyone can perform. And it's also about teaching. So if you learn it, what do you do next? Is teach everyone. Again, enablement function is important that we all need to do in our roles. Fifth is also an important one that I like a lot. When you're talking about DevOps, again, it's just not CI/CD. But if you're just doing CI/CD, it's orchestration. We can give you templates. It's already on GitHub. Someone put it, CloudFormation templates that create CI/CD pipeline in 2 minutes. But that's just orchestration. That will just move things from point A to point B. That is not DevOps. DevOps is building in guardrails. So when you move securely. Every single step that you move into should be incremental level of confidence that you gain. If you move from your developer workbench to a managed environment, you call it QA or whatever, when you move it, it should have an incremental level of confidence that your unit test passed. It passed all security policies. And some people call it DevSecOps, but at the end of the day, it's one and the same thing. It's part of the DevOps. You can have infrastructure as code, but just by writing CloudFormation, you are not doing infrastructure as code unless you are doing code reviews, unless you are validating your code, unless you are making sure that your code is performant. So make sure that you go all full length. Don't stop halfway. Otherwise, you will not have full success. But also build those in. When you're thinking about DevOps, are you thinking about how would this product operate in production? Or you're just thinking, oh, my job is to write code, and someone else is building CI/CD pipeline for me. Someone else will figure out how it operates. Build in operability from the beginning. Think about architecting operability from the beginning. Build in observability from the beginning. When you're scaling DevOps, one important aspect is providing visibility to everyone, and that comes from instrumenting observability. Observability is a broader concept which includes logging, monitoring, alerting, notification, remediation, and visibility dashboards, whatever that is. The more visibility you provide to rest of the organization, they see the pain points, they also see the benefits. That way you can build on the success and correct the errors that you're doing. If you're not doing that, then it's not helping you socialize and scale it out. Especially in enterprise scene, there is a lot more functions across the company. But if you have a dashboard that talks about how you're improving, how are your lives getting better, then there are likelihood that others will incorporate the change as well. So those are the 5 different things. If you perform those well, the things that were going wrong can change for better. So instead of you becoming pseudo-ops, your cloud center of excellence or center of excellence or subject matter expertise, they can be the critical function that can enable DevOps throughout the organization. And they can be the guys who are helping you correct the anti-patterns. You can also establish that way empowerment and accountability. Remember, empowerment and accountability comes by doing right things and also preventing wrong things to going in. No one is going to give you access from day one. No one wants to reduce your security posture. No one wants to incorporate more risks. But you gain the access by doing right things, by showing that you are a good citizen. Standardization and patterns. When you're creating new teams, are they just creating new routines? But are they really standardizing them? Are they really making it parameterized? How are they doing it? If they do it well, then what you see is it helps in building patterns and standardization across the organization. And of course, teaching and built-in, that we talked about it, that's how your world will change, and that could be a measure of how your DevOps is going as well. So let's look into that. I'll invite Mike back so he can talk about the case study with one of our customers.
Thank you. 5 patterns with 1 bonus pattern. Yep, indeed. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome Steve Day. who is the Executive General Manager of Infrastructure, Cloud, and Workplace at the National Australia Bank. Steve.
Hey, Mike.
Hey. Good to see you. So we're going to practice DevOps by working within the guardrails we have and adjusting the stage. Thank you for the infrastructure provided by the event staff. All right, and there's a young man.
Yes, that's a very old picture.
Well, why don't you introduce what you're doing at NAB, your role at NAB, and sort of the initiatives you've taken on here recently.
Sure, so I run the infrastructure and also the cloud functions at National Australia Bank. National Australia Bank is an old bank. It's 150 years old, quite conservative. And up to about 10 years ago, we decided to outsource most of our infrastructure. In fact, pretty much all of our infrastructure. And that actually did exactly what it was intended to do. It lowered costs. All of our SLAs remain green every month. And even today, when I look at the monthly reports, everything's green. But everyone hates the situation, right? And they hate it because that outsourcing arrangement stopped innovation. It required statements of work and quotes and all kinds of work to happen before anyone could try anything new. So that actually then created an environment where nobody wanted to do innovation. We also lost all our technical staff, of course, because there was no technical work to do anymore, and we had non-technical contract managers on staff who obviously weren't that biased towards doing technical innovation.
Right, more cost down, and one of the things that makes me think of is Jeff Bezos often says, when the data doesn't match the anecdotes are probably right. So those businesses that were frustrated with that lack of innovation probably had a little bit of pent-up anger. So one of the things AWS offers is a program called 50 in 50, where we help customers migrate 50 applications in 50 days. And so this was something we socialized with yourself and other leaders at NAB. What made that a compelling program for you to take on?
Sure. So that whole lack of innovation is what spawned us to go into the cloud to get the right balance of infrastructure, outsourcing, and also internal skills and innovation. But we needed some imperative to actually make that work. We first were, when we put the cloud out there, it was very hard to migrate applications. It was very difficult to make it work within our organizational constructs. We had to hire people, but we didn't have a firm plan to implement. So we actually took on this 50 and 50, but we changed it to 30 and 50 because we're a bank and a bit conservative. And we then drove everybody to actually migrate 30 banking applications to the cloud within 50 days. And that created a real team sense. It created an imperative. Everyone got together and worked together to actually achieve that. And when we did, it sort of turned what people thought was impossible into something that was very positive, and it created a real sense of possibility with what we could do with cloud.
And I think that graph kind of shows some of that imperative creation happened early. This is along the horizontal axis, days, and vertically, the number of applications moved. About how many people, you said everybody, about how many people were involved in coming together from your side, the customer side, to move 30 applications in those 50 days?
Well, there were 40 core people, all right across the business, from security to operations to engineering.
You're doing a 50-day program, so just launching it alone. Right?
Yeah, but there was a far bigger than that. So we had corporate comms involved. We had a wider involvement as well across the business, right up to all of the senior executives that were commenting on the progress every day, which gave everyone a feel of how important it was.
That's right. That's awesome. Yeah, so people knew they were contributing. So what else did you learn?
Well, we learned that the whole cloud platform, being infrastructure as code, gave us the opportunity to build in a lot of our operational processes as code. So we were able to make the guardrails that we talk about in enterprise DevOps as a continual compliance system that was written in code, and our application teams didn't even know they were there unless they breached a policy. So it sort of gave our developers a very easy access to a landing zone, that we called it, which is a fully configured environment that had all these controls in it, that they could get started with straight away. And as long as they did everything as per the rules, they could go really fast. So it really did meet the promise of that enterprise DevOps.
Awesome. And how did you look at doing that with a pretty limited tech staff, right? Not a lot of, we're still bringing that talent back into the bank, so not a lot of cloud-savvy people on staff.
Yeah, so that's where we leveraged the Amos product from AWS, and that's a managed service that actually gives us that platform off the bat. Not only does it give us that platform, but it gave us a lot of the things that we needed as a bank. It gave us PCI compliance off the bat, gave us ISO, gave us Sarbanes-Oxley. So we had all of this compliance that we didn't need to go and build and accredit ourselves. We didn't need to run controls every month because Amazon was doing that for us, or still are doing that for us. We didn't need to hire and train those people as quickly as we would have as if we were doing this ourselves. And I think we wouldn't have started the migration process yet if we didn't have access to that platform, and we did have to build it ourselves. It also gave us a very high level of confidence that we were using best practice, because it was actually AWS that was helping us build these landing zones. Solution architects were signing off on them, saying they are best practice, they are resilient, they are cost effective, they are secure. And that just gave us a very high sense of confidence that we were doing the right
perhaps
thing.
some of the folks that were concerned about how cloud was going to be implemented.
Yeah.
And then, that's a lot of people to integrate, right? So you've got, some new vendors coming in and helping you through these things. Like, how did you integrate your operational activity across the different actors throughout?
Yeah, so that's where we really integrated it tightly into our ITSM. So we use ServiceNow, and AMS has its own API that we were able to integrate directly into ServiceNow. So our developers then had access to a service catalog in our ITSM. They could go in, they could ask for a particular landing zone. That would fire an API call across into Amazon. AWS would then turn up a landing zone immediately within a few minutes, provide that back to the developer, but it was done in that way that it had all of the governance and controls of ITIL, but it's invisible. And that, I think, was the real beauty of it, that we had a lot of controls, but the automation of those controls, right, didn't get in the way of our developers. So they just
bridging
quick
that,
and easy.
Enterprise DevOps space.
Correct. Yeah.
Well, great. Well, Steve, thanks so much for sharing your story.
Thank you.
Everybody, round of applause for Steve. Now, Jit will introduce another use case.
Mike, that was a fantastic example. I want to welcome and bring up Jason Carr from Fidelity on the stage. Jason, welcome.
Thanks, Ajit.
Have a seat, please.
How's it going?
Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do at Fidelity, and what's your role?
Sure. So my name is Jason Cow. I'm a director of security architecture at Fidelity Investments, where my team and I focus on basically building secure infrastructure, building security tooling, and basically trying to enable our development teams to migrate and develop quickly in cloud. And I just see you swap the photos or the slides, but that's a beautiful photo you guys put up of me there.
We are great.
From a few years ago, so thanks.
Cool. So the idea of enterprise DevOps resonated with you. Why so?
Yeah, so Ajit, I'm actually going to take you a few years back. So a few years ago, right, we did something I like to call security by checklist. And security by checklist, right, looks like where basically the development team develops, goes through a life cycle, and then once you're ready to push to a higher environment, they come out and talk to the security team and say, hey, I'm ready to go. Let me go through this basically checklist of items, which a lot of times is very manual. And they go down the list and say, okay, did I meet all these requirements? Did I get all these green checks like a laundry list or a grocery list? And then once they're good, right, they move to production. Turns out this isn't very effective. We think it's cumbersome. We think B, it's ineffective, right? And it's also point-in-time security, right? So if you look at point-in-time security, it's only as secure as the last time you did it, which could be like, I know Mike mentioned 3 years, right? Which hopefully isn't the case. But also, it's only as good as a person doing it if that's a manual process. So what we've moved to is a more inclusive process where we embed security in from the beginning, right? And there's different ways we do that, but that really helps us iterate faster and also iterate quickly and securely.
This operating model resonated with you as well with something that you implemented.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us about how you did it?
Definitely. So I took the slide from Mike. It looks really similar, if you guys have paid attention throughout the presentation. But basically, right, we have the same thing at Fidelity. Fidelity is a very large enterprise. We have different silos, different organizations, right, different development groups, and we have security, compliance, infrastructure, teams like that, right? And because of the size of these organizations, sometimes there isn't as much communication as we like. It's not like the far right, which is a perception, right? We don't really have jack of all trades, master of none, where they do everything and push everything out. What we really do is we have a security team, like the Center of Excellence you talked about, right? My team is actually like that, where we sit within the development organization, and we build security tools, we build that infrastructure that teams really need so they can develop quickly and securely.
So there are a lot of tools, and we talked a little bit about service catalog, config rules. There are Cloud9 that allows you to have templates that your development team can use. CodeStar is there. Among these, were others that you used? How was your overall, when you look at enablement function, do you just look at the tools, or you also look at the patterns and practices?
So we look at both patterns and some of the tooling, right? And I know we talked about this earlier, right? One of the key things, right, is security by design, security architecture, and we focus a lot on that as well to make sure that people are designing securely. We look at the patterns, right, so if they're repeatable or not, and then we also look at the tooling. And I know, like, for example, some of the tooling that you guys mentioned, right, we definitely use CloudFormation very heavily as infrastructure as code. We also use tools to scan those and kind of shift left earlier in the development cycle.
Got it. So when you're doing this, wasn't there any conflict of interest?
Yeah, so if you actually go to the next slide.
Sure.
There definitely is a huge conflict, right? One of the things that we've seen from the beginning, and we've actually shifted away from this mindset, and I know some of my colleagues are actually here today, and we've talked heavily about this, is that there's a mindset, and we talked about agility, right? Is migrating to cloud quickly. You'll hear words like, or catchphrases like, or buzzwords, right? Like migrating the speed of DevOps, the velocity of DevOps, things, speed, basically. I mean, what we've evolved to is migrating to cloud quickly and securely, where security is first class is one of our concerns.
So is that how your development teams are looking at it now?
Yeah, so it's a slow process, right? And there are definitely still some challenges in play. What we look across is basically, how do we get to that mindset? And I know it's a tough process, right? Because looking across like infrastructure as code, we have development teams who aren't quite as used to some of the pieces that they typically don't touch, right? Like infrastructure, networking, identity and access management, right? And that's one of the challenges that we face. So I'm going to actually take a different approach here. So I'm going to ask the audience this, just show of hands, right? How many of you flew into Vegas for reInvent? Should be quite a few of you. Great. So how many of you guys, hopefully the same amount of hands, went through airport security on the way here? Okay. Actually, I'm gonna do something better. So we're here at the Venetian today. We're here in Las Vegas. How many of you guys are here at the Venetian? Should be all of you, hopefully. And let me ask you this, right? When you went through airport security, when you came through the Venetian, you guys went through security, right? At airport security, you took your belt off, maybe. You took out, I don't know, Pete, maybe you bought like 4 laptops or something and that camera, your smart batteries, and you had to go through single file downstairs, right? They said there's 3 lines or whatever, and you went through security. How many of you found that to be either a nuisance or a challenge or just a roadblock in your way to reInvent? Quite a few, right? And that's something that we've seen, that sometimes security is seen as a roadblock, right? All I want to do is get out to production, or if Carol, like Mike said, right, comes with a list of 75 items, says you need to fix these before you get back out to production. If you see development teams ask and say, okay, what are the least amount of things I need to fix? What are the quickest things I need to fix so I can get back out? And it's not about really solving the source of the problem. It's about just getting back out. And I know you talked about the culture of inclusiveness, right? And one of the things that we've noticed is that security is here to help, right? We're all trying to do the same thing of delivering value, but also delivering value securely.
Mm-hmm. So that's how so basically it seems like you had to not only get into people's mind that you're not a roadblocker, but also you help them scale out. Were there other challenges in between?
Yeah, so I'm sure if a lot of you guys are aware, right, scaling is tough. We tried and we toyed around with the idea of, we talked about the Center of Excellence, embedding a security personnel within every development team. Turns out we have a limited amount of subject matter experts. So a few months ago, I was actually riding in the airport with one of my colleagues who works in UXD, user experience and design, and she said she had the same challenge of how do I get enough resources, enough people to help scale across the enterprise and do enough UXD. And also a secondary challenge was how do I have these people focus on what they really know, what they really do, and basically have these subject matter experts solve the tough problems, right? And leave some of the simpler problems. I know you talked about like S3 configuration. That's, in our mind, it's a simpler problem that can be automated, should be automated, and that's something that we've done.
Cool. I know we have just little less than 3 minutes left. What are the different tools other than security that you used?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about basically two different phases, right? One is, and I know you mentioned Service Catalog, but I'd like to first talk about security controls, right? Because I think that's paramount to doing security right. One of the things that we've done is we've implemented a suite of detective and remediation controls, as many of my colleagues here are aware. We've also used preventative measures, right, including CF and NAG, which is an open source tool by Stelligent, that allows us to basically build in security right into the development cycle. So we can shift left earlier in the development process, and by doing this, right, reduce some of that friction and time to value. Another one we also use is Service Catalog, right? We use a lot of CloudFormation at Fidelity, which is key for infrastructure as code. And by using Service Catalog to layer on top of existing products and making them secure configurations, that really does help us shift even left and make things less complex and also very manageable through CloudFormation. That's key for what we do.
Got it. In 30 seconds, what's next on your list of priorities?
Sure. So, our journey really never ends. Like, we're still trying to automate a lot of things at Fidelity, and that's key, right? As we continue our journey, looking at areas or opportunities that we can automate more, that really helps our dev teams not just migrate quickly and develop more, it helps them really migrate quickly and securely to cloud.
Well, thank you so much for sharing how you have been implementing enterprise DevOps. This has been wonderful.
Yeah,
thanks for coming.
Appreciate it.
All right.
Ajit and I would like to thank you very much for attending our presentation today. Thanks very much. Here's our contact information if you'd like to reach out to us. Of course, we'll invite you to rate our talk. We'd love your feedback. We'd love to hear what you hear about our concepts in the comment section. Thanks very much. Cheers.
Don't forget to provide feedback, guys. Thank you.